The Bones and Bobbins podcast is now on Patreon.
Yay!
Would you like access to bonus episodes, which are super awesome, digital extras, exclusive merch, and more? Join us in the Curiosity Shop at patreon.com/Bones and Bobbins.
Your generous support helps make the show happen and will also earn you our very eternal gratitude and entry into our private Patreon-only Facebook group, which is delightful.
So delightful.
Yes, there were a lot of haunted lawn ornaments hanging out there this week.
There are, and I love it.
I did not see that one coming.
No.
Like, flamingos of many varieties. Definitely haunted.
Yes. Incredible.
Anyway. In a dusty old shop on a forgotten old street, you'll find two witches with books 3 boxes deep. Next to rusty old needles and faded red thread, you'll come in for yarn, but leave with pigments instead. Whether poisons or patterns, we're always discreet, where creepy and crafty and morbidity meet. Welcome to the Bones and Bobbins podcast. Hello, morbid makers. We are your slightly creepy,
Mildly disconcerting,
somewhat sinister,
delightfully discomposed,
opaquely odd,
merrily morbid,
marvelously misanthropic hosts.
And this is Bones and Bobbins, Season 2, Episode 11, Not So Mellow Yellow.
I'm Haley from Red Handled Scissors and the Very Serious Crafts podcast.
And I'm Natalie from Uberdork Designs, an official true crime creative.
Fancy.
Fun. And
Fancy.
we just hit our 1-year anniversary.
Holy shit.
Right?
I mean, yeah. I remember us being like, well, it's lockdown, so I guess we better finally start that podcast when we're going to start.
Right?
Yep. Better not wait until this is over. So
It is my favorite thing to come out of the pandemic.
yes,
By far.
mine too. Because it's fun, and I get to see people, but I don't have to leave my chair.
Yes.
And I don't like to leave my chair.
Understandable.
Yeah. So, that's exciting, and I didn't even realize it until you told me, and
I
am
completely
delighted.
forgotten to Facebook memory. So I was like, oh, hey, look at that.
That's funny. I so infrequently look at my memories, but every once in a while, it'll do the auto serve when I open Facebook on my phone,
Yep.
and that's when I see them, and so I must not have done it that day. But I am very excited for us.
I am too.
And thank you, listeners, for listening to us talk about creepy shit for a year.
Seriously, and y'all are the best. You're
Absolutely.
all super amazing, and we appreciate all of the support.
Yes, we really do. So you know what I'm doing right now?
What you doing?
I'm wearing absurdly tiny shorts.
Tiny shorts.
They're so tiny. I do not understand. Why are shorts this tiny? Why would you make shorts this short? Why is this the only length of short that seems to exist?
That's a good question.
The
Because
mysteries abound.
patriarchy. I'm blaming everything on the patriarchy. So.
Okay. I feel comfortable with that. I don't know if I feel like since I don't go outside that the patriarchy isn't terribly involved in my shorts.
True.
but it would be immediately upon stepping outside my door.
Makes sense. Do they have pockets, though?
Hell yes, they have pockets.
Okay.
They have 4 functioning pockets.
All right.
They aren't as deep as pockets should be,
Of
but
course.
they are made well cut off jean shorts, because heaven forbid I just cut off jean shorts. No, I had to buy those. Oh God.
As you do. Well, yay for tiny shorts.
Tiny shorts.
So what else is going on?
Something terrible happened this week.
Oh no.
I was in the shower, and I happened to glance down, and you know how when something is slightly out of place and it just catches your eye?
Mm-hmm.
So I have, like, a bath mat, like one of those non-slip ones that you stick on the floor in the shower so you don't fall on your ass and break your hip.
Oh yes, I have those as well.
Yes. Well, mine wasn't being used at the time for reasons I don't know, because I'm dumb. And I looked up and I saw this, like, large brown thing on it. And at first, like, I have very dark hair.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was just, like, hair that had, for reasons unclear, collected on this bath mat hanging on the wall of my shower.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked again. And it was a gigantic fucking spider.
Oh no. Mm-mm.
Like, huge. Like, visible segmentation of thorax and, it was massive.
Oh.
It was also a daddy long legs. So it wasn't like...
Those are my favorite, though.
Yeah, the thing about those is they're sinister motherfuckers.
Oh,
Because they are poisonous.
are
And-
they?
Yeah, they are, but they're, what is it? Mandible? Is that what we call them on spiders? I don't know. They aren't, the mouth parts that they would use to bite aren't long enough to pierce the skin.
Oh.
And so they can try all they want, and it doesn't matter, because that part of their body simply is not equipped to bite people. So that's why they're harmless. But this thing was huge.
Oh,
like,
wow.
Multiple inches, and by multiple I mean like 2, in diameter.
Oof.
Yeah,
So
and
So you burnt down your bathroom.
so I finished my shower with my eyes wide open, despite all of the soap and whatever running into my face, just to make sure that fucking spider didn't move. Because I have a tub shroom, and if that spider came down, it was gonna just hang out by my feet.
Ooh,
Because it
yeah.
couldn't go down the drain, because I have a thing that keeps the drain from clogging. And
Yeah.
so I'm keeping an eye on this damn spider.
Oof.
And it stays put. I angled the shower head away from it so it wasn't getting splashed. And I was like, all right, buddy, you stay put, and I will get a container and transport you outside.
Aw.
I just need you to stay put. And
Do
so...
not move.
Oh, it did not stay put. So I exited the bathroom for like a moment. I don't even remember what it was for. It was, I think maybe a delivery came or something, but like I still had a towel on my head and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came back in the bathroom, that motherfucker was gone.
No.
And I was like, oh no.
It's the worst, because then you're like, where is it now?
And so I'm looking around. Do you know where it was?
Uh-oh, where?
It was making a web across the, like, little alcove where the toilet is. So, like, back and forth,
directly above the toilet.
Cheeky little fucker.
I know! And I was like, listen. And now it was, dry, so it was all spread out, so it was as big as it could be, and I was just like,
Oh, no.
we had a deal. We had a deal, and you had to decide to go and make that web in 33 seconds. I don't even understand how that happened that fast. Which makes me think that web already existed, and I don't want to think about that.
Nope.
So, luckily, I happen to own multiple Dysons. And I just keep touching my face because I keep feeling things, and I'm talking about spiders. Yeah. Oh, God. Anyway, so I was trying to decide which one was going to handle this. And went with the handheld with an extension that had a turbo boost.
Yep.
Even though my hand was going to have to be there and I was going to have to be vaguely below it.
It still seems like the right choice.
Yeah, it worked. It was fun. And then I made Jeremy empty the vacuum when he got home. Yeah. Anyway, if that fucking spider had just stuck to the plan, it would have been outside.
Yeah.
Living its best spider life. But no, it had to make a web over my toilet.
It chose poorly.
It chose death. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry.
I had my own encounter with giant live creatures.
Uh-oh.
We were driving home, and we now live pretty much butt up against 8,600 acres of wildlife reserve.
Mm-hmm. Which is amazing.
It is amazing, and I love it. So we're driving, and, the road's like 55 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I look, and I'm like, I see something in the road, and I'm like, ugh. Roadkill. It's not uncommon. There's a lot of roadkill, but it's usually, your standard possum, raccoon, deer kind of thing.
My dad has a song he sings every time we would come across roadkill when I was growing up, also in the Midwest.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
I'm not sure where it came from. I don't know if he made it up or if it came from an old TV show, but it's all I can think of.
So I'm like, I drive past it, and I'm like, what the fuck? I was like, was that a turtle? And they were like, I don't know. And I was like, I think there's a friggin' turtle.
It happens.
Mind you, we have a turtle. We have a turtle named Archie. But he's little. This dude, not so small. So I turn around, and I was like, there's no way this turtle's getting across the street. It's 55 miles an hour. Not that there's a lot of traffic, but there's traffic.
But turtles aren't known for their speed.
Right. So I flip around, and I pull up, and sure as shit, it is a giant, like, almost the size of, like, a trash can cover.
Holy shit.
It is a giant friggin' turtle. And we're like, huh. And we were not about to let this turtle not get to safety. So it was barely in the road.
No, but only certain kinds of turtles get that size.
Right. So we're sitting there, and I'm like, okay, he just got on the road, so let's get him off back where he started from, and
right.
Safety.
Because you don't want to move turtles too far away from where they start, because then they will never find home again.
Right.
And they will try to find home for the rest of their lives and die.
Right. So I'm like, all right.
If you don't know that and you have kids who want to pick up a turtle, you should keep that in mind if you're not going to make it a pet.
Exactly. So I'm like, all right. And before we get out and really realize the true stance of this thing, I'm like, well, just pick it up from behind and run it back to the, just make sure the head's away from you. You're right?
Yeah.
Which, if it was...
I'm picturing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at this moment, like using a trash can lid as a shield.
Right, but,
I'm sure that happened.
Not like we're rolling around with a trash can lid in our car. So we're like, okay, this is not that. None of us are brave enough to try to pick this thing up because we're not even sure we could just carry it, just one of us, because it's that damn big. So we're digging through our trunk and we're like, oh, so like the youngest has like this. It was like a poster mailer, so like a cardboard tube. And she's like, I'm just gonna kind of wave it at it and see if I can, get it to turn around and move. So she goes walking out to him, and she goes, boop, boop, and it snaps. We're like, oh my God. The head on it.
You didn't try to pick that up.
And
that'll take your finger.
So we're like, that's not gonna work. So
I guess if it snaps onto it, you could just, like, fishing rod it over.
Right. We found out later on, when Eldest went to school the next day, from her peers, that apparently that's how you get them, is you stick but we didn't have like a small tree trunk. I mean, you're going to need a substantial stick to drag it, but you poke it and then they grab onto the stick and you drag them.
Oh no, I know.
But this thing is not, I'm like, you don't understand the size of this thing. I mean, we're not talking about like some little dinner plate sized turtle or some tiny little, no, this thing was huge. So then we're like, okay, so I started Googling
and I tried... is this a tortoise?
Right, right, seriously.
Someone found a tortoise, by the way, in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, wandering down a street last week.
That kind of tracks.
They found its person.
Oh.
It had a funny name, too, and now I can't remember what it is. Yeah. But anyway, carry on.
And I tried calling the reserve, because we were close. It was close to where the actual reserve's like center was.
Maybe it escaped.
Right. Well, yeah, so I was like, maybe somebody there will know how to deal with this. And of course it was after hours, so they didn't answer.
Right.
So then we're like, okay. So I started Googling, and they're like, put down like a towel and have them climb on the towel, and then you drag it. And I was like, okay, well, we've got like a box. We've got an empty box. So we flattened out the box and we threw it down on the ground, and we're trying. And meanwhile, we're like ushering traffic around and just like, hi, we're normal.
Well, at least there were enough of you.
Right.
Like, you could, in fact, there were enough of you to be visible.
Right.
And there was enough time to signal.
Yeah, and it was light out, so, which was another fun factor.
That's good, because that would have not been a good deal.
So, this
just
turtle...
picturing your faces.
This turtle was the very embodiment of, I think the fuck not. Like, it was not
fuck around and find out.
Pretty much. It was like, no, I'm not, nope, I'm gonna do whatever. So I'm like, all right, let's just kind of like hang out here. So, because it started walking then, and we're like, okay, so it starts inching towards the other lane, and then it stops a bit, and then it's inching. So we're
hi, Biggie.
Just trying to usher it. Mm-hmm. So it gets to the other side, and we're like, all right, cool. Let's get in the car. We'll whip around. We'll block the traffic from the other side now until it gets on the grass. So we jump in the car. We're getting ready to flip it around, and a pickup truck comes flying. And I'm waving out of the car, and I'm like, turtle! And we're like, oh my God. The girls were like, cover your eyes. And we're like, no. And somehow this pickup truck missed the turtle.
Oh my gosh.
But for a moment, we were like, oh my God. And so we finally so we stayed there. We finally got the thing across, like, to where it clearly was trying to go. But I swear to God, if I see that turtle ever again try to cross its happy ass back the other way, I'm going to be prepared. That's all I'm saying. But, so that was my large animal encounter of the week.
I had a pet snapping turtle when I was 5.
Aww.
We lived in a house where the backyard was a river.
Okay.
Which is really super safe for your 5-year-old. But whatever. I knew that you didn't get into there. And there was even a path down, like, on tree roots that stuck out so you could fish.
Nice.
Just,
Oh, yeah.
in
People
case you-
here
yeah.
will just park on the side of the road and just start fishing. I love the name of our river because I think it's so much fun, but we live by the Kickapoo.
Well.
So yeah, people just
That's
brand.
fun.
You'll see like abandoned cars on the side of the road, and the true crime / murderinos and all of us are like, that's suspicious. But it's
Yeah.
really just people that
Mine was the Kalamazoo River.
nice.
Also suspicious.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's good times with the
Yeah.
large creatures this week.
And well, my snapping turtle was a baby. Yeah. My mom almost hit it with a lawnmower.
Oh no.
And saw it and was like, nope, and threw it in my kiddie pool.
Okay.
Because my kiddie pool was right there. Or maybe she threw it in my sandbox. I had like both of them right next to each other. And I, of course, appeared and was like, ooh, turtle.
Mine now.
And that turtle lived in, I think I turned the kiddie pool into a habitat.
Oh,
and
nice.
it lived in that thing until it was, I don't know, like the size of my head. Mm-hmm. And then one day it crawled out and went on about its business, presumably to the river.
Okay.
And I was just like, okay, bye, turtle. But it snapped at everyone. Never once snapped at me. I could hold that thing,
Aww.
and it was just like, I'm a turtle. And my mom or my stepdad would come near it, and it would be like, nope. Anyway, I guess we should probably talk about things that are not animals, since we do not have an animal-related podcast.
That's true. Today on Animal Corner. What we should actually do, you know what we could do? We could take a little break. We can thank all of our fantastic Curiosity Shop members over on Patreon.
Yes, because they are amazing.
So amazing. And if you want to join us there, this part of yes, definitely. This part of the podcast is where we would totally give you a pretty normal and not at all creepy welcome. Like, shout out so everyone knows how amazing you are.
We wouldn't give you a snapping turtle.
No snapping turtles. And no giant spiders unless you really like them? Maybe?
I mean, some people do.
They do.
I had a friend with a pet spider named Movedra.
Oh. That's a good name.
She was interesting.
There you go. But yeah, join us. It's fun. It's such a delightful little group of people.
It is fun, and we're talking about fun things this week.
We're
gonna take a deep dive into the reality and the idea that is Mad Hatters, and how that's actually pretty terrifying. So, yeah, you should hop on over.
Indeed.
You're the best! And we would totally go explore hidden old graveyards in the woods with you. And we would also help you drag a snapping turtle across the road.
We absolutely would.
Yep.
And now that I know how to do it.
You really should have called me. I am great with tiny facts like that.
I should have known.
That is my wheelhouse. Like, weird shit that one might pick up in the Midwest. And never remember. I remember only those things.
I honestly feel a little foolish because I was like, I didn't think we had turtles that big here. Because I didn't.
I don't think they usually are. Like, that's an old ass turtle.
Dude, that asshole was huge.
I mean, usually they're like dinner plate sized,
Yeah,
and
no,
that's sort of the big end, at least in the parts of the Midwest where I grew up and where you live.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get further south, anything goes. But, I mean, but it's also mostly painter turtles.
Yeah.
At least where I grew up.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm expecting if I do any research that it's probably some like legendary turtle that, you know,
You saw a cryptid? A cryptid snapped at you?
Yeah.
All right, well, we should give it a cryptid name.
Ooh.
I need our listeners to tweet or comment or wherever the hell you're listening to this and name the cryptid that Natalie obviously has seen.
Yes. Because
it's very
asshole
important.
Is not creative enough.
This asshole.
And if it pops back, I'd like to, call it by its name.
Yeah, I mean, it needs a good one. Like, in certain parts of Ohio or New Jersey, I'd be like, oh, yeah, it's a variation of Mothman, because they always look different.
Right.
I have never heard a description of Mothman that was the same. And I fully feel like this turtle could sprout wings.
Seriously.
Oh my gosh. So, want to hear a story about school buses?
Absolutely.
All right. So, because I have been very, very busy with a lot of deadlines, Natalie kindly put together the subjects for this week. And because of that, I actually didn't know going in the history of my topic, and I still don't know the history of hers. So it was really fun to jump into it. So today I am going to tell you why school buses are yellow.
Yes.
Now, I honestly thought that the history of school buses being yellow was going to have like a really specific and really gruesome history that would just make me never want to get in a vehicle again. And obviously there are plenty of stories of pre and post yellow bus transportation tragedies. Like, we all have heard about a bus overturning on a highway.
Yes.
And that is terrifying and horrific. But this story isn't one of them. Or I guess at least it's not horrific in the way that you'd expect. So, in the early part of the 1900s, as the U.S. moved away from rural one-room, one-teacher schoolhouses, which, fun fact, my dad actually attended.
Oh, wow.
Yep. He must have been one of the last group of kids who would have attended a rural one-room schoolhouse, because my grandmother definitely went to that school as well. It was called the Blackman School.
Aw.
And anyway, so just to say, this history isn't as far removed as you might think. So as people moved away from those rural one-room schoolhouses, and as people moved from farming life and into cities, the student populations were consolidated into larger area schools instead of the smaller local one-room schoolhouses that might have a handful of kids at best.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because those area schools could be miles away from the homes of the kids who were attending them, school buses to transport those kids to school and back home again became a matter of, obvious practicality and necessity. Because before school buses, you had, like, kids driving wagons with draft horses. And my grandmother got her driver's license at a stupefyingly young age. I think she was 11.
No, my God.
Specifically,
farm equipment.
For farm equipment, and specifically so she could drive her and her neighbors to that school.
Wow.
That and that was one of the local one rooms. So yeah, I want to say it was 11. I may be lowballing that, but I think it is that absurd. And so
makes sense.
yeah, and I mean, even now, I don't know if it's actually well known, and I don't even know if it's a thing anymore, but farm kids could get their driver's licenses really young where I grew up. And because they were operating tractors and farm equipment, and they often needed to drive them on the road to move from field to field. And so you could legally get a driver's license at a pretty young age when I was growing up. I don't know if that's a thing now.
The local public school has Bring Your Tractor to Work Day, or to School Day.
Oh, yeah.
Every year. So they drive their tractors. And when my eldest started driver's ed, the behind the wheel, the teacher was like, I've never had anybody that hasn't operated a vehicle of some sort before, because they're all farm kids. And she's like, yeah, I grew up in the city mostly, so I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah,
that's really
thing.
Funny.
Yeah.
I just remember, I'm not actually even sure if this is apocryphal or not, but my grandma and possibly also my dad had wooden blocks strapped to the car. I know that my grandma did, for driving, because her legs weren't long enough
to reach the pedals.
But on the tractors too.
Oh, wow.
So they could shift because they couldn't reach the clutch.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I remember shifting tractors really young.
That just makes me fear Children of the Corn even more than I already do.
I mean, I don't know that I could do it now, but I was like sitting on my grandpa's lap at his farm.
Yeah.
And so it was less complicated, but I do know the sound an engine makes when it needs to be shifted. Anyway, wow, that was several tangents that have nothing to do with this, except I guess it gives you a little context.
Yeah.
All right, so like I said, because the schools could be miles away from homes and the children attending them needed to get there and back, school buses really became a necessity, especially for rural students. Urban students at this time were already going to more consolidated public schools, but like in New York City, Public School 1 probably had, well, I mean, I've been to there. It's an art space now, but it definitely had more kids than any of these area schools had, even though it was similarly walkable like the one-room schoolhouses were. But so now all of these farm kids or kids who have just moved into smaller town settings from more rural traditions are now needing to go to these area schools. And now that so many children were being transported together in a vehicle that would need to make frequent stops, safety quickly became a concern to both parents and schools, which obviously it would. And so here is where we enter Dr. Sear. So in 1939, Dr. Frank Sear, a professor at Teachers College at Columbia University here in New York, organized a Rockefeller Foundation-funded conference where national school bus construction standards, including color, were decided upon by transportation officials from the then 48 states. Alaska and Hawaii were not part of the Union yet. And they were also joined by school bus manufacturing companies and paint companies. During the conference, much to the relief of bus and paint manufacturers, who just wanted everyone to buy the same damn thing so they could finally mass manufacture vehicles instead of doing a custom job literally every single time, standards including body length, ceiling height, and aisle width were set. This is also the conference that settled upon the now ubiquitous, at least in the United States, also in Canada, and in many other places, school bus yellow. According to Dr. Sear, at the conference, color stripes that ranged from red to yellow were put on a wall, and the attendees narrowed the choices down to 3 very similar shades of yellow. And they narrowed it down to 3 specifically to account for the imprecise nature of mixing colors for paint at the time. Because it wasn't like you walk into a hardware store and you scan your paint chip digitally.
Right.
You had to mix it by hand. And as someone who has operated a paint machine in a hardware store and done both, it's an interesting experience. And so it made sense to have those 3 colors so you could have that variation and still be in line with the standards. In the following few years, 35 states adopted these standards, with Minnesota bringing up the rear in 1974, when they became the last state to change to the standard color.
They were just real stubborn. Right. They were like, nope, we're not going to do it.
They had, and I'm going to try to say this without an accent, and it's not going to work. They had Minnesota golden orange. Minnesota golden orange. No, that still had the accent. Anyway, moving on. Which honestly seems pretty close to me. That is more or less, golden orange is how I would describe school bus yellow. Yeah. And Dr. Sear himself always thought the color was more orange than yellow, which is kind of funny.
It is.
So the very recognizable yellow that we see on every bus that is currently on the road, like every school bus, is officially known as National School Bus Glossy Yellow. And that is true both in the US and in Canada, which I think is kind of interesting.
It is.
But at the outset, it was called National School Bus Chrome. And it was adopted by the National Bureau of Standards as Federal Standard number 595A, color 13432. And the color, quite reasonably, was selected specifically because the black lettering was most visible in the semi-darkness of dawn and twilight, when many students, especially in the winter, would be riding these buses. And especially in the earliest days of busing, when it was a much slower process.
Yeah.
And because it really, really stood out visually, it would also be a way to signal to people around that the vehicle that they were seeing that was this truly obnoxious shade of yellow was a school bus and that caution should be taken. And so it was really interestingly to me both a practicality reason and a safety reason.
Yeah.
But it worked equally well in both respects, which I feel like doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Alas. School Bus Yellow, or National School Bus Chrome, as it was then referred to, had a dark side.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah. Though very effective, it had some serious safety downsides for the people manufacturing the buses. National School Bus Chrome was not only a chromate, which is already a known carcinogen, as the name would imply, school bus chrome, it was a lead chromate.
Ooh.
With a lot of lead. Like, second only to gray in the amount of lead that a worker might absorb.
Oof.
Yeah. And now that there were actual standards in place for color and manufacture, buses new and old would need to be painted with this super fun chromium yellow lead paint. And yeah, like I said, it's one of the more dangerous of the lead paints. And I'm not sure how many people understand or have heard why lead paints were so widely used anyway. Like in the before times of them being banned because they were so dangerous. But if you happen to be wondering, it's because lead paints have significantly greater opacity, and so they require fewer coats, and so they're cheaper. Like, lead paints were marketed as being able to cover up anything, and they were right.
At a cost.
It was just a bad idea.
I can understand the popularity, though, then.
So the workers who had to work within the manufacturing and the painting aspects of that manufacturing were exposed to seriously high amounts of lead and had the side effects that were related to seriously high amounts of lead. And I'm not entirely sure whether this concern also extended to the children, but I'll get to that in a second. So, when all lead-based paints were finally banned in the US in 1978, National School Bus Chrome was no more, and National School Bus Glossy Yellow took its place. And the new color was, of course, significantly less toxic, but it also required more coats to achieve the same opacity as fewer coats of that lead paint. And so it was also then significantly more expensive for districts to use it. But there wasn't another option. I also bet Minnesota was pissed that they didn't hold out for a couple more years.
Right.
And like I said earlier, it isn't really clear to me, from a practical standpoint, how much danger children themselves were truly in from the outside coloring of those school buses. But we do know that the danger of the lead-based paint did and still does pose a danger to people who live, work, and visit older buildings, like developmental delays, seizures, headaches, memory issues, and more. And those problems happen now.
Yeah.
Like, I live in a very, very old building in New York City. I don't even want to know what is a couple layers deep on my walls.
Yeah.
Because it's lead paint.
Right.
I mean, it has to be, given how old this building is. And so, I mean, I'm not licking the walls.
I was going to say,
paint
don't
chips.
lick the walls.
I'm also not procreating. So it is less of a concern to me, but still, that's not good. And it's a problem that persists.
Mm-hmm.
And even after the ban was enacted, that was just a ban on new manufacturing. Existing painted school buses and any other lead-painted surface remained in use or on the road until they were retired. And, I mean, right now you can walk into any attic or antique store and still find plenty of lead paint because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's sort of terrifying to think of how many things are contaminated with this particular neurotoxin. But yeah, best not think too hard on that,
Yeah,
so as not
oh
to
no.
have panic attacks. But I would also like to say that the irony of lead, which is extremely dangerous to kids, being used to keep kids safe, is not lost on me.
Right?
Yeah. And so I just have a couple of fun facts to wrap up this section with about Dr. Sear, because he was an interesting dude, and I sort of took a deep dive after reading his obituary.
Oh, okay.
And I found out that he might have felt right at home during the past year of remote schooling, because in the 1950s, he experimented with teaching by telephone. And in 1965, he helped establish a television system for rural schools in the Catskills, which is part of New York State.
Right.
And like 1965. And I believe that currently there's still a channel in the Catskills that broadcasts AP classes.
That's awesome.
Because they're not necessarily readily available in every school. And I grew up in a school small enough that we didn't have them.
Yeah.
So I just think that's really interesting.
That is.
So he was already doing that in the 50s and 60s, which
That's really cool.
I think is fantastic. And Dr. Sear is himself sort of known as the father of school bus yellow. That is his reputation. And apparently, as a child, his son, William Sear, asked the professor, his father, "If you're the father of the yellow school bus, what does that make me?" And apparently, whenever William the kid saw a school bus out in the wild, he would say, "There goes one of my brothers." I just thought that was very charming.
That is very charming.
Yep. And this is, I feel like, one of the few instances where someone truly meant well.
Yeah.
Like the lead paint was a problem, but it wasn't necessarily a known problem.
Right.
I don't think that it was known to be healthy, but I don't think the extent of the danger was known at the time. But Dr. Sear really seems to have devoted his entire life to working specifically to further the education opportunities in rural schools. He wrote a bunch of books on the subject. And when he died at 95, I want to say it was in 2017, but I did not write it down. He was working on a book about rural schools in the 21st century.
Wow.
Which I think is just so cool.
It is to be that devoted to accessibility at,
Yeah, and that really was his entire focus. All of his books are about that. The things that he specifically studied were related to that. And we're talking about a professor at Columbia in New York City.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really interesting.
I do too. That's pretty cool.
He sounds fascinating, and I didn't find anything particularly problematic about him. And I hope there isn't anything, because I kind of like this guy.
Yeah. Huh.
So that's School Bus Yellow.
That's awesome. I didn't know any of that. I mean, I knew there was a problematic toxicity, which makes it. I mean, like, that part I knew, but I didn't know, like, how amazing, and this whole standardization, and why, in my head, you would think, hi, designer, it's that obnoxious yellow, so the lettering pops. You know what I mean? Like, but I never really put a lot of thought in it.
Yeah, there are multiple national standards keepers, recorders, setters, I don't know, that have these particular colors as requirements. So I think, and I'm going to totally screw these names up, the National Transportation Bureau now has a much longer name. And the Bureau of Highways and whatever the hell, that also is part of this standards, and it has like a hex code, and like it's a very, very specific kind of standard that's in use way more widely than I had known or would have expected. I didn't know that it was required.
It's fascinating to me that something that is so widely used was actually agreed upon and implemented so long ago.
Yeah, well, at a literal hotel in New York City where transportation representatives, school representatives, and the people actually manufacturing the shit who stood to make a lot of money all got together and were like, all right, let's solve this problem. Let's do this.
Like, that is kind of fucking magical.
It is. I mean, it's
like,
also...
that's how shit should work. To some extent.
I'm sure that there are problems when the public and the private sphere connect in an area where money is involved. Right. But that also, that is a Venn diagram whose ship has sailed. I don't think there's a possibility of separating them at this point. But that is a really good example of it being used. Like, that power, that ability to set standards was used for a totally reasonable solution. And I'm not sure if this standard applies to private schools. Like, I know that our church bus was definitely not school bus yellow. Yeah. And I don't think... I think they're called yeshiva schools, the Hasidic Jewish schools that are really prevalent in Williamsburg in Brooklyn. I can't remember if they are that color. I think many of them are, but I'm not sure if all of them are.
See, Elvis goes to a private school. They don't even have a bus. They have other vehicles, but they don't. But yeah, that's so all for safety and accessibility of education. Like, it's
and like school buses through the ages are fascinating to look at, because the first ones. Well, have you ever been on the jungle ride in Disney World?
I have not.
Or the Jungle Cruise. Maybe it's not called that anymore. I don't know. But it's basically a boat with many seats with a tarp over it. Nice. And that's pretty much exactly what the first school bus looked like. Or the first purposeful school bus.
I remember the girls were devastated that we lived too close for them to take the bus.
Oh, I was mad about it too.
And really wanted to be on the bus. And I remember Alice's first kindergarten field trip, where she got to go on a bus. And she was super excited she was going to get to go on this bus. And then I got a phone call because she was refusing to allow the bus to go because there's no seatbelts. She was very concerned about the safety and well-being and the legality of the fact that she was in a vehicle and there was no seatbelts.
I looked into that particular tangent as well when I was researching this, and maybe I will cover this at a different point in depth. But buses that are below a different size, so like the shorter school buses or the special needs school buses, like very specifically smaller and outfitted for specific use school buses, do have seatbelts, and some states require them by law. But it hasn't been found that seatbelts actually make school buses safer. It has been found that maybe they make it less safe.
Oof.
So, I don't know. I would have to take a much deeper dive into that, but it doesn't seem that there's any real solid evidence that seatbelts would be a good thing on school buses. I would think that they would be, just because we all think that they would be.
Right. Logic. It just seems logical.
But I think that it's maybe has to do with escape and
His
speed.
little fingers trying to open seatbelts. That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but it seems like that comes into play. Like, what happens in an accident if you do have seatbelts or if you don't, and the outcomes seem, at least according to what I was looking at, to be better if you don't.
Okay, that makes sense.
So,
I can see that.
But I could be completely wrong, so if you know better, tell me.
No.
Yeah, I will gladly run a correction on that. But yeah, so yellow school bus. Yay!
Yay! That is pretty fun. So, we have covered badass ladies that helped win wars when we talked about the Night Witches. We've covered women whose bodies changed colors while falling apart just to provide a better living for their families with the Radium Girls.
And we are not talking about the Love Wins, folks.
No, we're talking about the Radium Girls.
Mm-hmm.
So today, I'm going to talk about badass women who helped win wars and turn colors doing so.
What? I am so excited about this because I don't know anything about it. At least I don't think I do. And that seems super weird given the subject and the time period.
Exactly.
But, I'm so excited to hear you.
I was the same. Like, I'd heard of them, but I did not know. So today I'm going to talk about the World War I munitionettes of the UK, otherwise known as the Canary Girls.
Munitionettes?
Munitionettes.
Oh, I bet I know what happened.
You're like, oh, yes. So when the war started in
I just mean given the color.
Yeah.
And munitions.
Yep. So when the war started in 1914, approximately 24% of working age women were already employed, but they worked mainly in domestic jobs with only a small amount doing like very simple work in smaller factory industries.
Right.
As the war began to rage on, though, women would find both the need to work and the variety of jobs available to significantly increase. There was a major shift from the traditional roles they had before to more male-dominated areas because all of the men had gone off to fight. Well, not all of them, but, you know, their husbands were off. They had to rate, you know, they had to feed.
A good portion of the able-bodied men.
I want to say millions.
In World War I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say, for some reason, the number 10 million sticks in my head, but I could be completely wrong on that. So the biggest shift occurred, though, following a shortage of shells in 1915. Mm-hmm. And it was then that the Ministry of Munitions was founded to control Britain's output of war material. So it oversaw all of the aspects of the production and the supply of all munitions, and was under the, let's say, enthusiastic Minister for Munitions, David Lloyd George. Now,
8.7 million.
Oh, okay, there we go. Thank you. So,
who served at some point between 1914 and 1918 from the UK.
There we go. That makes sense.
Sorry. You know I got a Google facts.
Nope, I appreciate it. So under George, a number of new initiatives were introduced to like amp up the production levels. Basically, they were going to lose, and they needed to fix that quickly. So one of those was to appeal to women to register for war service work. So women had now gone from working as housemaids, cooks, nannies, to being employed in munition factories, where they became known as munitionettes.
I kind of love that, even though it's kind of demeaning.
Right.
Like, it seems like a punk group from the 80s.
Like, I could totally picture a roller derby team.
Yeah.
That. It would
or
definitely.
Like a riot girl band.
Yes. So they performed both heavy-duty and delicate tasks that required more skill than the brute force that guys are used to doing. They also handled detonators, explosives, machining shell cases.
I mean, smaller hands.
Right?
That's why a lot of kids used to, hopefully, in the past, be employed in those areas.
Yeah. By the end of the war, there were almost 3 million women working in factories, with about a third of those employed in the manufacturing of munitions.
Hot damn.
Now, a typical work week for the woman who worked in these factories was about 12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Whew.
With most working on a bonus system that encouraged productivity and faster work, which the Radium Girls also faced the same. The more you kick out, the more you get paid.
Radium Girls.
Poor peanuts. So to get an idea of how needed their working bodies were, many factories actually built temporary housing and set up nurseries so mothers could join the workforce.
No way.
Yep. There were some men that continued to work there, and they appreciated the help. But we could do an entire episode on the harassment that these women faced.
Oh my gosh.
Including deliberate sabotage by those that weren't.
Stories from my grandmother working at a light factory.
Oh God, I can imagine.
Yeah. She built lights for President Ford's inauguration.
That's amazing.
And was the only person allowed to touch them.
Oh, that's very cool.
Security reasons.
That's so cool.
And the men were pissed.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Anyway, sorry.
So no, don't be
a tangent we didn't need.
So hey, to further add insult, the munitionettes were paid less than half of their male counterparts.
Oh, of course.
And striking was made illegal, so there is little they could do about it.
I mean, I understand the needs of a war effort, but like, Are
you ready to get real pissed?
Mm-hmm.
The War Cabinet Committee on Women in Industry agreed that with equal pay in principle, they said, but believed that due to their, and I air quote with both middle fingers, lesser strength and special health problems, what the fuck are those? The output of women would not possibly be as great as that of the male workers. Fucking patriarchy.
Aren't there like literal actual numbers?
Yeah.
That they
Yeah. Again, whole nother episode. Jesus. A whole lot more cussing.
So much more cussing. That needs to be a Patreon topic because we're going to get taken down from anywhere else.
Yes. In further reading section on the show notes, you're going to find an amazing set of oral histories. The Imperial War Museum curated from 9 women what it was like to work in the munition factories, and they detailed what the factory life is really like. There's also a link to a podcast by the Imperial War Museum as well. That is, I think it's under 20 minutes long. That includes real life women too as well. So I highly recommend that. So in addition to these delicate tasks, women got the super special added bonus of also working with hazardous chemicals. on a daily
Well,
basis.
of course.
Such as trinitrophthalate, which is TNT.
Ooh. Yeah.
Despite the safer working conditions that allegedly came with our buddy George, they didn't, and his fancy position, these women worked without adequate protection. Again, at less than half the pay. I about flipped my freaking lid. So I found a range of speculated wages for women in munition factories, with the average being about £3 a week. Now, taking £3 a week in 1916, obviously, you know, we're talking about conversion to US dollars and quite a bit, but I ran it through 3 different calculators, like 3 different programs, and it's about $267.48 a week now. For 72 fucking hours. They made like $3.22 an hour, I think. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. My eye, just everything twitching. So.
Yes.
Cursing patriarchy aside, what is TNT?
But I have a question.
Yeah?
Why weren't the men off fighting pissed that the women weren't making more money? Because presumably those women were maintaining the families and the homes that those men would be returning to?
Right.
So you would think that fighting men would be pissed.
You would think, but I don't know that they knew how much. I mean, think about the length of time it would have taken communication to get from their wife to them being like, hey, BT dubs.
I don't know exactly how long that took. I think it was faster than we think it is, but yeah.
Also, they were probably like just trying to stay alive. I mean, if they're on a battlefield, what are they going to be able to do about it?
Throw a bayonet in the air. I don't know.
It's bullshit. I mean, and when you look at it that way too, I mean, it shafts the veterans as well. I mean, all around, it was just crap. So, sciencey time. TNT is a pale yellow solid organic nitrogen compound that's used chiefly as an explosive, and it's prepared by like stepwise nitration of toluene. I said that wrong. It's not toluene. It's toluene. Toluene. It doesn't look like it, but I listen to all of the pronunciations. Yes. So, first step. It is nitrated with a mixture of sulfuric and nitric acid to produce mononitrotoluene, which is MNT. Then the MNT is separated and then reintrated to dinitrotoluene, which is DNT. In the final step, the DNT is nitrated into trinitrotoluene, which is the TNT, using a mixture of nitric acid and oleum. Nitric acid is then consumed by the manufacturing process. But the diluted sulfuric acid can be reconcentrated and reused. After the nitration, TNT is stabilized by a process called sulfitation, which is the crude TNT is treated with aqueous sodium sulfite solution to remove less stable isomers of TNT and other undesired reaction products. The rinse water from sulfitation is known as red water and a significant pollutant and waste product of the TNT manufacturing. So, like,
I bet it smelled awful too.
Right? Super fun stuff. Stuff that you should totally be handling under shitty conditions for 72 hours a week, right? I mean, like,
I am gonna go ahead and assume there were no gloves.
Yeah, well, because they couldn't have anything. Oh my god, they were patted down. We'll get to that.
Okay.
But, like, what could possibly go wrong? And why? Why are they called the Canary Girls, you might ask?
Does it have to do with the coal mine?
No coal mine.
Okay.
But, so, munition cells were filled with a mixture of TNT, which is the explosive, and as an extra bonus, a propellant called cordite.
Huh.
Even though the dangers of both and hazards to the health of those working with them were quite known, they were mixed by hand, like direct contact with skin.
Oh.
The chemicals in the TNT then reacted with the melanin in the skin, causing a yellow pigmentation that stained their skin the color of canary.
Oh my God.
It gets better.
I don't think I realized that melanin was what it was reacting with.
Yeah. And
wow.
now,
I thought it was just the sulfur related everything.
Right? Oh, so now that's unpleasant, right? But it's actually not the most dangerous part, and it's not the only place the yellow comes in.
Oh, good.
Typically, the discoloration of the skin faded over time from that aspect.
Typically?
Yeah. It was so commonplace. There is even facial creams that were marketed directly to the canary girls that allegedly helped removing the stains. Allegedly.
I feel like you should just rub oil on your face and create a barrier.
That's pretty much what it was like just a really thick, oily cream.
Oh, God.
The serious consequences of working with the TNT powder was, liver toxicity, which led to anemia and jaundice.
That's
this
fun.
Condition known as toxic jaundice gave the skin a different type of yellow hue.
Yeah, gross yellow-green.
Yep.
With a little bit of orange thrown in.
It typically began with sneezing fits, a horrible cough, severe sore throat. Totally makes sense because they're dealing with massive amounts of fine powder flying around every day. Breathing that is going to start with respiratory issues. Digestive fun followed next. Many said the worst part was the constant metallic taste. Other fun symptoms that you could find as a bonus sometimes.
Are they vampires?
Included hair turning green or just completely falling out, chest pain, breast deformation, weakening of the immune system, vomiting, anemia, migraines, and, fertility problems. In fact, there were hundreds of cases of munitionettes giving birth to yellow children. Nicknamed...
What in the actual fuck?
Seriously, nicknamed baby canaries. And nothing could be done for the babies at the time. And eventually, the discoloration just slowly faded. There is, I think...
So the babies were okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Crazy pants. In Katie Addy's 2013 book, Fighting on the Home Front, a munitionette was quoted as saying, "You expected to feel poorly. Our skin was perfectly yellow, right down through the body, legs, and toenails even." While some just couldn't tolerate it and quit, most only left when their health completely failed. By 1960...
Well, of course they did.
Right?
They needed to work.
They had no other choice. So by 1916, which was only like a freaking year later, it was such a concern that the government launched a medical investigation to closely study the effects of TNT on the munition workers.
I feel like, duh.
Right? Like, it just... But, yeah. Data was gathered by investigators acting as female medical officers posted inside the factories. They found that the effects of... You know, espionage, it's fine. They found that the effects of the TNT could be roughly split into two areas. There was irritative symptoms, and those mainly affected the skin, the respiratory tract, and the digestive system. And then the toxic symptoms, which included the nausea, jaundice, constipation, dizziness, fertility issues, all of that.
Oh.
It was years
Because
later,
those should be separated.
right? It was years later that they actually established the possibility that the irritative symptoms were also partially caused by the cordite in the shell mixture. Like, at that point, they didn't even look at the cordite. Which they should have. But they were just focused on the TNT. Now,
Yes.
you would think long hours, shitty pay, harassment, and the plethora of health issues would be more than enough. But none of that was the worst part of the job.
Oh, no.
Most feared the explosions the most. Yeah.
Well,
Explosions.
that is reasonable.
You see, blasts occurred pretty frequently and were an ever-present hazard. The explosives...
Well, you're working with volatile explosive material.
They ignited on several occasions, injuring or killing workers. When the women came in, they were inspected every day when they showed up for work and couldn't have any metal on them whatsoever. Like, not a bobby pin. Nothing. Now,
and that's not a bad idea.
No, it's not. I mean, kudos for one small, but it's only because then they would blow up the goods. So the Deadliest Blast occurred in 1918 when an explosion at the National Shell Filling Factory in Chilwell killed over 130 workers, which is the biggest loss of life during a single explosion during the First World War, which says a lot, and Britain's worst ever disaster involving an explosion to date. Amazingly, much like the fact that an average 2 Munitionites died a week, it was a tragedy that was kept secret at the time. Like, it's still hard to find information on it because the government went to, like, great lengths to hide this shit.
There were 1,037 women watching.
Yeah.
Their friends blow up.
Yeah. And, it's... many factories actually required workers to wear dog tags, which would be used.
They weren't supposed to have metal.
They weren't metal. That would be used to identify casualties in the event of an explosion. So, but
which is practical.
It's practical, but that fact leads me to believe that it wasn't really a fucking secret. If you're,
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think it also, like, should be said that these jobs had to be done.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And, like, someone had to do them. It's not like they would have just gone away.
Right.
But Jesus.
Yeah.
They didn't have to be this dangerous.
Yeah. Even then, there was precautions that could have been taken.
Yeah.
So by the end of the war, it's estimated that around 80% of the weapons being used at the front line were made by munitionettes. Based on all the secrecy and lack of knowledge, it's extremely hard to find accurate statistics on exactly how many canary girls died, whether on the job or due to the effects of the job. Mm-hmm. When the war was over and the men returned, vast majority of women were forced out of the factories, particularly the married women, who many thought shouldn't be in any type of work to begin with. And then there was a great emphasis of jobs being available for the men returning from the front, to the extent where even some jobs that were traditionally female-held positions were now turned over to the men that returned with the injuries. Some say the government tried to give a somewhat like a token, a gesture of things with the Representation of the People Act of 1918, which granted some, but by all means, not all, women the right to vote.
Wait. Mm-hmm. That's compensation for...
That's,
Okay.
That's a whole other episode, too. The political aspects of this entire population of women and the effects of how dangerous this was, but how needed they were, and just there's a whole political side of this that easily is an episode in of itself. But I tried to focus just on the science-y medical.
Sorry, my
That's
cat.
fine.
Mr. Big Stuff, stop it.
That, my dears, is the very, very condensed story of the Canary Girls. There is an article in a British publication that had a photo of one of the few remaining canary babies.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in her 90s. And she's like, eventually it wasn't yellow anymore. Charming little thing.
I mean, at
yeah.
least she wasn't in yellow.
And
I don't.
they're still not exactly sure how it happened, why it happened. Like, it wasn't a matter of them just being born jaundice.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a mystery. And I'm like, that's...
I don't feel like it's much of a mystery. But, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Fun fact related to this particular time period.
Mm-hmm.
One of my Singer featherweight sewing machines was made... Well, half of it was made before the factory was switched to a munitions factory. And the other half of it was made after, and this is World War II, not one, in the UK. And the other half was made after. So looking
That's
up
fun.
all the serial numbers is bonkers.
I can
Because
imagine.
the years are so disparate, but all of them, but everything is original on the machine. So it's like it time traveled.
That's crazy pants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's, there's a lot of photos of these, these delicate little looking women standing next to these giant freaking rockets they're packing full of.
Yeah.
Missiles, rather. Rockets,
Those
missiles,
girls had dicks big enough to see from space.
Yeah, they really did. And
the biggest of big dick energy.
Yep. Yep.
Hot damn. Ooh, I just found a propaganda painting.
Oh, yep,
like
yep.
the join up or knit your bit, that kind.
Yes.
For munitions makers. They're wearing leather gloves and that shit.
Oop. Oh. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And yet.
Wow! I'm both fascinated and really pissed off.
Right? I'm like, yay, that, but oh my god. Yeah.
No, I say no.
So, I think that brings us to the weekly worst way to die.
Da-da-da! Well, what is your weekly worst way to die?
Mine is getting my yellow self accidentally blown up while making $3.72 an hour. $3.72, that's what it was, not 22.
That's fair.
That would suck.
Yeah, mine is the giant fucking spider in my bathroom.
That is fair. That is completely fair.
Two very different awful ways to die.
Yes,
So,
indeed. Yes,
we will
indeed.
post our regular weekly worst way to die poll, generally speaking, on Wednesdays. And you can tell us which way you would particularly not like to die.
Or tell us your own, too. We're always open.
Indeed.
Fact, do you want to be spooky internet friends?
Probably.
I mean, come on. Who wouldn't? You can find us at Bones and Bobbins on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. Pin us a little pin on your worst way to die. That's cool. Tell us about your cats. We like cats. Cats are fun. And you can find
Mine
us...
are yowling right now.
Mine literally coughed up a fur ball earlier. I'm really hoping I...
Oh, I didn't hear it.
It didn't catch. The audio didn't catch. I'm like, that's great. Thanks. But you can also just find us at bonesandbobbins.com.
It's true. And don't forget to review this podcast and yell about how pissed off you are on behalf of the Canary Girls, because Jesus Christ. But also because it pleases the internet gremlins, and that's how we show up in recommendations so that other morbid souls can find us, and so that we can continue making shows and talking to you.
Bring forth the morbid souls, and every good rating brings down the patriarchy.
Da-da-da! I don't know why that is my fanfare for today, but it is.
It is. It works.
Uh-huh.
And on that note, let us leave you with some advice that you should never, ever forget.
No.
Lock your doors.
And don't run with scissors.
And dear
or
Lord,
bombs.
Dear Lord, wear gloves when working with chemicals.
Yes, please. And masks. Respirators.
Yes, respirators. Just
Okay.
protect all the things.
Yeah.
Each episode of the Bones and Bobbins podcast is written and researched by Haley Pierson-Cox and Natalie Hoyce. Our music was composed by Loyalty Freak Music. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bones and Bobbins. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify, or check us out wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts so you won't miss a minute of our strange and creepy content.